If you're not sure when to use sine law and when to use cosine law to solve your triangles, we're about to break it down. Let's say you've mastered your sine law and your cosine law and you can use both to find either a side or an angle. You are an awesome machine. But then you see a problem like this, a problem that not only doesn't even give you a triangle, it doesn't tell you whether you should start with sine law or with cosine law. What do we do here? You can A, give up forever, or B, persevere. Let's choose B. So now we actually have to use our noggin to figure out whether to use sine law or cosine law. Let's dive in. So in trigonometry, in order to solve a problem, you always need three pieces of information, either two sides and an angle, two angles and a side, or three known sides. And depending on what is given will determine whether we use sine law or cosine law. But there is one thing that people often miss, and we're going to quickly look at it first. Let's go. The first question to ask yourself is if you have a right angle triangle. A right angle triangle means it's a 90-degree angle, and we signify it with this little square in the corner. So if you have a right angle triangle, what you want to use are your primary trig ratios, sine, cos, and tan, also known as SOHCAHTOA. And in some cases, you would use Pythagorean theorem as well. Now, you could use your sine law or your cosine law, but you're just giving yourself extra work. Now I want to move on to sine law versus cosine law. And believe it or not, I don't try to memorize the rules. I just try to visualize what would fit into each formula. And yes, I'm fully aware that most students prefer sine law over cosine law, so let's start with that one first. So the next question is, do you have a side and an angle opposite of one another? It should look like this. Because that makes it fit perfectly into the sine law formula. So you need a side and an angle opposite of one another plus one other piece of information, either a side or an angle. So that means we could have a side at an angle and then another angle. We call that SAA, side angle angle, and it looks like this. Or we could have a side and an angle and another side. We call that SSA, side side angle, and it looks like this. And both of those fit perfectly into the sine law. So there's one other variation when I have two angles and one side. We call that ASA, and that side and angle are not opposite of one another. So what do we do here? So people can get hung up on this, but it's actually super simple. We just need to find the third angle by subtracting the other two from 180, and now we have a corresponding side and angle, and we can use our sine law. Okay, moving on. What do we do when we have two known sides and one angle between them, which is known as the contained angle? And it looks like this. Well then, I would use the cosine law to find the third side. If you look at the cosine law formula, I have one side length completely isolated, and on the other side of the formula, I have the other two sides with the angle between them. And we know this as the side angle side, or an SAS triangle, which works with cosine law. And our last example will have three known sides and no known angles. Let's think about it like this. If I were to rearrange my cosine law formula, I would have the angle isolated on one side, and the other side of the formula only has side lengths and no angles. That means that if I have side, 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 or SSS, which looks like this, I should be using the cosine law to find any missing angle. Now let's do a quick review. I use sine law when I have a side and an angle opposite of one another, plus one other side or angle. So that could mean SAA, side angle angle, SSA, side side angle, or ASA, which is when I have two angles and I find the third before starting my sine law. And to use the cosine law, I either need all three sides, SSS, which helps me find any unknown angle, or I need two sides and an angle between them, also known as SAS, to use the cosine law and find the third side. So let's look at a couple of examples where you're asked to solve these two triangles. Now, solve means to find every missing side and angle, but not only are you not told whether to start with sine law or cosine law, you're not even given the triangle. The first thing I would do is sketch out that triangle and label it, although you will probably get to a point where you don't need to do that anymore. And then I check what is given in the question. So I'm given angle X, I'm given angle W, and I'm given side length W, which means I can use the sine law because I have an angle and a side length opposite of one another. And for the second example, again, let's give it a quick sketch and label our sides and angles E, F, and G. I'm given angle E and side lengths F and G, which is two side lengths and the angle between them, which means that I would have to use the cosine law to find the third side. Figuring out when to use the sine law or when to use the cosine law is super easy. Take a screenshot of this for later, but you don't even need it because if you just look at your information, you'll be able to see which formula fits that information better. Now I want you to check out this playlist where we dive in deeper into how to set up and how to solve problems with trigonometry. See you next time.